On Memorial Day weekend of 2025, a visitor to Sequoia National Park was spending a warm afternoon by the Kauai River with family and friends. It is exactly the kind of day the park is made for. Towering trees, blue sky, and a beautiful mountain river running clear and cold over the rocks. And then, in a moment, the river swept the visitor away. What followed was not a quick rescue, but a search that stretched on for 2 full months. Swift water teams, divers, drones, sonar, and search dogs worked the Kauai again and again, held back the whole time by how dangerous the water itself was, until the body was finally recovered in late July. This was not on some remote peak. It was not a fall from a cliff. It happened in the front country, near the roads and the picnic areas, in a river that looked, on a hot day, like the most inviting thing in the world. And that is the first thing to understand about Sequoia. In the park of the largest trees on Earth, one of the deadliest things is the pretty river beside the parking lot. This national park is loved by millions of visitors every year. But what most people don't know is the dark truth hidden beneath its beauty. Stay until the end to discover the shocking reality. Sequoia National Park sits in the southern Sierra Nevada of California. It was established in 1890, making it one of the very oldest national parks in the country, the second ever created. It is world famous for one thing above all others: the giant sequoias, the largest living things on the planet by volume, including General Sherman, the single biggest tree on Earth. Well over 1 million people come every year to walk among these ancient giants, some of them thousands of years old, in groves that feel like natural cathedrals. It is a serene, awe-inspiring, deeply gentle experience. And that experience is exactly what disguises the truth about this park. Because Sequoia is not just a forest of big trees. It is one of the most vertically dramatic landscapes in North America. From foothills barely 1,000 feet above sea level, the park climbs all the way up to the summit of Mount Whitney, at over 14,500 feet, the highest point in the entire lower 48 states, standing on the park's eastern edge. A single park, stretching from a warm river valley to the literal roof of the continental United States. That range is the key to understanding the danger here. Because the gentle grove of giant trees and the brutal high wilderness are the same park, and most visitors only ever see the gentle part. They walk the paved loop to General Sherman, they crane their necks at the giants, and they leave with the impression that Sequoia is one of the safest, softest places imaginable. But this park kills people at both ends of its enormous range. It kills them in the crowded front country, in the beautiful river running past the road. And it kills them in the vast high country, on the peaks and passes of the High Sierra, where the park itself warns that you may need to be entirely self-sufficient, and that there is never any guarantee rescuers will be able to reach you quickly. Between those two extremes lies one of the most demanding wildernesses in America, hidden behind the friendly face of the big trees. Start with that river, because the Kauai is the danger people least expect and most underestimate. It runs down out of the high country through the heart of the park, past the campgrounds and the picnic areas and the entrance road, and it is fed almost entirely by melting snow. That means 2 things. The water is brutally cold, only a few degrees above freezing even in summer, and its volume and speed change dramatically with the season and the heat of the day. On a hot afternoon, especially in a big snow year, the Kauai can be running high, fast, and far more powerful than it looks. The surface glides by, clear and inviting, and it hides a current that can knock an adult off their feet and pull them under in an instant. Again and again, this is how people die in Sequoia. A visitor wades in to cool off, or steps onto a wet rock at the water's edge for a photograph, or reaches in to retrieve something, and the river takes them. It has happened near the entrance sign, near the Hospital Rock picnic area, near the campgrounds, in the most accessible, most crowded parts of the park. And cold water kills faster than most people believe. The moment a person goes into water that cold, the shock hits, an involuntary gasp, a racing heart, a sudden loss of breath control, and within minutes the cold begins stripping the strength and coordination from their arms and legs. Even a strong, calm swimmer can be rendered helpless before exhaustion would ever set in. Add a fast current and a rocky, churning riverbed, and the outcome can be decided in seconds. The park's rangers plead with visitors every single summer in the plainest possible language. The rivers are beautiful, and they are picturesque, and they are extremely dangerous. Stay back. Give them the respect they demand. And every summer, drawn in by the heat and the beauty and the deceptive calm of the surface, people do not. And the danger scales with the snow. In years of heavy Sierra snowpack, the melt pours off the mountains for months, and the Sequoia runs higher, colder, and more violent deep into the summer, long after the calendar says the danger should have passed. Those are the years the river claims the most, when visitors arrive expecting a tame summer stream and find a churning, ice-cold torrent instead. Drowning is, quietly, one of the leading ways people die in this park, and almost every one of those deaths happened somewhere that looked completely safe. A swimming hole, a rocky bank, a shallow-looking crossing, a photo spot at the water's edge. The Sequoia does not look like a killer. That is precisely why it is one. The river is not the only danger in the front country. The road that climbs into the park, the General's Highway, is a steep, narrow, endlessly winding mountain road, gaining thousands of feet through tight switchbacks, and it demands full attention from drivers who may never have driven mountain roads before, in vehicles far too large for its curves. Distracted by the scenery, or simply overwhelmed by the grade and the turns, drivers have had serious accidents on it. The park also holds a world of caves beneath its surface, cold, dark, and disorienting, where a wrong turn or a slip on wet rock carries its own risks. Even in the developed heart of Sequoia, the mountains shape everything, and the danger is never as far away as the crowds make it feel. At the very opposite end of the park lies a completely different kind of killer, and it is the highest, most exposed terrain in the country. Mount Whitney draws enormous numbers of hikers and climbers, all of them wanting to stand on the highest point in the lower 48. But Whitney is not a gentle walk-up. The standard trail is long and punishing, and the more direct climbing routes involve real exposure, steep rock, and genuine danger. People fall here, and the falls are often fatal. In one recent case, a hiker fell around 1,000 feet from a feature near the summit known as the Notch. In another, a climber fell some 500 feet from a ridge, and a second person fell while trying to help. A solo hiker was seen near the top, and moments later his backpack came tumbling down past a group below, with no answer to their shouts. These are not stories of reckless people. They are often skilled, fit, determined hikers, brought down by a single slip on exposed terrain, at altitude, where there is no margin for a mistake. And Whitney exerts a powerful psychological pull that makes all of this worse. People travel from all over the world, plan for months, and secure hard-won permits for the chance to stand on the highest point in the country, and that investment creates enormous pressure to reach the top no matter what. It is the same force mountaineers call summit fever, the moment when reaching the goal starts to matter more than getting home safely. Hikers push on when the weather turns, when the afternoon storms build, when their bodies are failing at altitude, because turning around within sight of the summit feels unthinkable. And they forget that the summit is only the halfway point, that they still have to descend the same exposed, punishing terrain, now exhausted, oxygen-starved, and often racing the weather or the dark. Most accidents on mountains like this happen not on the way up, but on the way down. The altitude itself is a hazard that visitors from lower elevations consistently underestimate. High on Whitney and across the park's high country, the air holds far less oxygen than the body is used to, and many people climb too high, too fast, straight from sea level. Altitude sickness can begin with a headache and nausea and progress, in serious cases, to fluid in the lungs or swelling in the brain, conditions that can become life-threatening within hours, high on a mountain where help is far away. And altitude does something quieter and just as dangerous. It dulls the mind, slows the reactions, and clouds the judgment, exactly when a hiker on exposed terrain most needs to be sharp. A person who is oxygen-starved, exhausted, and cold is far more likely to take the wrong step on the exact kind of ground where the wrong step is fatal. The high country builds its own violent weather, and it does so fast. On summer afternoons, thunderstorms tower up over the peaks, and the exposed ridges and summits become some of the most lightning-prone ground in the range, where a hiker caught in the open is often the tallest thing for a great distance. The temperature can plunge as a storm rolls in, and a hiker who started the day in warm sunshine at the trailhead can find themselves soaked, wind-blasted, and dangerously cold thousands of feet higher. Hypothermia does not require winter. At altitude, in wind and wet, it can set in fast, and it clouds the mind and saps the body just as altitude and exhaustion already have. These mountains can turn from a clear, benign morning into a lethal afternoon in the space of an hour. And the high country is vast, remote, and unforgiving, in a way the front country never hints at. Beyond the groves and the roads lies an enormous wilderness of granite peaks, deep canyons, and high passes, much of it a long, hard journey from any trailhead. This is genuine backcountry, where a person can be days from the nearest road, in terrain that requires real skill to travel safely. In the summer of 2025, a fit, active local hiker separated from his group in rugged country, planning to meet up with them later. When he did not return, a search began, and his body was found below a high peak. He knew the area. He was capable and experienced, and the terrain still took him. That same year, the park's search and rescue teams responded to dozens upon dozens of incidents and lost multiple people, a reminder that behind the peaceful image of the big trees, this is one of the busiest and most demanding search and rescue landscapes in the national park system. To grasp the scale is to grasp the danger. This is a landscape of enormous vertical relief, where the ground can fall away thousands of feet, carved into deep canyons and sheer granite walls by glaciers and rivers over millions of years. Distances that look modest on a map become brutal in reality, up and over high passes, across boulder fields, through terrain that punishes every mile. A day hike that seemed reasonable at the trailhead can turn into an ordeal at altitude, and a person who runs low on daylight, water, or energy far from the road is in a serious situation, because in this country the way out is as hard as the way in, and there are no shortcuts. The sheer volume of emergencies is striking. In a single busy year, the park's rescue teams have responded to 60 or more search and rescue operations, and over one holiday weekend alone, they were pulled in 8 different directions at once. A helicopter already saving one unconscious hiker when the call came in about another who had just fallen to his death. This is the reality behind the postcard of the peaceful giant trees. A relentless stream of emergencies spread across a park that runs from a warm valley to the highest, harshest ground in the country. The snow that feeds the deadly river brings its own danger higher up, in the form of avalanches. The Sierra Nevada can receive tremendous amounts of snow, and in big winters the high country holds a deep, heavy snowpack well into spring and even summer. On steep slopes, that snow can release without warning, and skiers, climbers, and hikers venturing into the high country in the snow season face real avalanche terrain. After one historically heavy winter, an avalanche in the park caught and injured a man who had to be airlifted out. And the same lingering snowpack that causes avalanches also buries trails, hides the route, and turns ordinary stream crossings into dangerous, fast, freezing torrents well into the summer months. Even the giant trees themselves, the very reason people come, are not entirely without danger. These are the largest living things on Earth, and a mature sequoia can drop limbs that are, by themselves, the size of ordinary trees. Standing timber and heavy branches do fall, especially in wind or after fire has weakened them, and the forest is a living, changing, occasionally hazardous place. But the most sobering danger to the groves in recent years has been fire. Giant sequoias evolved with fire and depend on it, but the intense, drought-fueled wildfires of recent years have burned hotter than these ancient trees can withstand. In just a couple of catastrophic fire seasons, wildfires killed thousands of giant sequoias, some of them thousands of years old, trees that had survived every fire for millennia until now. At one point, crews wrapped the base of the largest tree on Earth in protective foil to try to save it from the flames. For visitors, wildfire brings smoke that chokes the air and reduces visibility, sudden closures and evacuations, and burned terrain left unstable long after the fire is out, with weakened trees that can fall without warning. The park's wildlife adds another dimension that visitors often take too lightly. Sequoia is black bear country, and its bears are intelligent, powerful, and strongly drawn to human food. A bear that learns to associate people with an easy meal, from an unsecured cooler, a food bag left in a tent, a snack in a car, loses its natural caution and becomes a genuine hazard to visitors and ultimately to itself, since a bear that grows too bold often has to be destroyed. This is why the park is so strict about food storage, requiring bear-proof canisters and lockers throughout. These are not bureaucratic rules. They exist because a wild predator and careless human habits are a dangerous combination, for both sides. When something goes wrong in Sequoia, help is often much harder to reach than the crowded groves suggest. The park's terrain is enormous and rugged, and across much of the high country, there is little or no cell coverage. A helicopter cannot always fly, cannot always land, and cannot always hoist, depending on the weather, the altitude, and the terrain, and some of the park's most dangerous places are the hardest to reach. Swiftwater teams, rope teams, and dive teams are called out constantly, into the very conditions that created the emergency: the cold, fast water, the exposed rock, the deep snow. And the park says the quiet part out loud, in its own guidance to visitors. Prepare carefully, understand that you may need to be self-sufficient in an emergency, and accept that there is never any guarantee rescuers will reach you quickly. That is not a park being pessimistic. That is a park being honest about what it is. But the deepest danger in Sequoia is the assumption baked into the whole experience. The giant trees are so peaceful, so ancient, so overwhelmingly gentle, that they set the tone for the entire visit, and people carry that feeling of safety into places where it does not belong. They stand at the edge of a snowmelt river on a hot day, feeling as safe as they did among the trees, and they misjudge the water completely. They set out for the summit of Whitney with the confidence of a walk in the park, and underestimate the altitude, the exposure, and the descent. They wander into the high country drawn by its beauty, without the skills or the preparation that country demands. They forget that the paved loop to the biggest tree on Earth and the fatal exposure high on the mountain are the same park, connected by 14,000 feet of rising, wildering terrain. The serenity of the groves is real. But it is not a promise of safety. It is only the doorway to a much larger and much wilder place. That is the true nature of Sequoia. Not menace. Not cruelty. Indifference, on a scale that is almost impossible to hold in the mind. The giant trees have stood here for thousands of years, through drought and fire and storm, since long before there was a nation to protect them. The granite of the high peaks was shaped over an immensity of time, and the Kauai has been carrying the melting snow down out of the mountains for longer than the human story itself. The park does not know how gentle its groves feel. It does not know that the river looks inviting, or that the summit looks close. It does not warm the water, or thin the exposure, or lower the mountain, for anyone. It simply is what it is. Ancient, immense, towering, and completely indifferent. And that is not a reason to stay away. It is a reason to be honest about where you are. The millions who visit Sequoia and go home safely are not the ones who conquered it. They are the ones who respected it. They kept well back from the beautiful, deadly river and did not wade in to cool off in the snowmelt. They acclimatized to the altitude, turned back on the mountain when they had to, and treated the exposed high country with the seriousness it demands. They understood that a park can hold the gentlest grove of ancient trees and the highest, harshest wilderness in the country at the very same time, and that the peace of the one says nothing about the danger of the other. They grasped the one thing that so many of the lost did not, in the moment it mattered. That the serenity of the giant trees is not the whole truth of this place. It is only the first, smallest part of it. So the question is not whether Sequoia is worth seeing. To stand beneath the largest trees on Earth is one of the great experiences a person can have. The question is whether you understand where you are when you go beyond them. Not the version with the paved loop and the giant trees and the crowds. The real one. A park that climbs from a warm valley to the roof of the country, where a beautiful river drowns people beside the road, where the highest peak in the lower 48 throws hikers 1,000 feet down its cliffs, and where the high wilderness is so remote that rescue can never be promised. Sequoia will not warn you when the river is stronger than it looks, or when the altitude has dulled your judgment, or when the exposed rock will not forgive a single step. It only stands there, ancient and towering and serene, waiting to see whether you understood, before you left the shelter of the great trees, exactly how vast and how high the rest of it truly was.